Bom dia a todos que estão nos assistindo. Mais uma live sensacional que irá acontecer com Rodney Palmer, um jornalista renomado no Canadá e premiado devido às suas seus grandes assuntos, né, na mídia, e que trouxe pela primeira vez o assunto dos efeitos nocivos do Wi-Fi nas escolas. Então, nós recebemos o IMF Brasil, o Slow Phone e o Celular e Saúde, com a Silvia, do Celular e Saúde, e o Fabiano, do Slow Phone. Nós aqui recebemos o Rodney Palmer para fazer uma apresentação. Bem-vindo, Rodney. Welcome to Brazil.
Thank you very much, and forgive me for not speaking Portuguese today.
You're forgiven. Thank you for being here with us, and thank you for your time. So we would like you to present yourself, and then we can go to the presentation.
Sure. I'll give you a bit of background on my involvement in this whole question. I worked as a journalist for about 20 years. And the last half of it was as a foreign correspondent for Canadian television news. So I lived in India for 3 years. I lived in Israel for 3 years. And I lived in China for a number of years. And we had to come back to Canada when my family started getting ill from the pollution in all these countries. And so we kind of retired early on, went into a different line of work, and settled in a very cute little small town in Canada. It's a little town where people go skiing, and it's at the foot of the ski hills, and nothing could be more perfect, really. Except when my kids started going to school, we noticed a host of symptoms in the kids. And I had been involved in some problems with environmental illness previously due to sick buildings, like moving into brand new buildings with all the glues and the bad ventilation. And so we looked at that was not occurring. And we finally realized one day that when my son, and every parent is experienced this, one day you just let them spend a little too much time on the computer because they're quiet. And his ear went red, bright red, one ear, and hot to touch. And we thought, well, maybe these health problems that we're noticing with him have to do with electricity. So this was the first idea of it. And I knew my wife was sensitive to electricity. She didn't like being in the car if there was a cell phone on. It started to give her a particular headache that she said was kind of pressuring her head, a specific symptom. So one day we're in the kindergarten class with my daughter, who was 4. And my wife, Patty, said, "Oh, you must have your cell phone on. I'm getting that particular symptom." And I said, "No, my cell phone's in the car." And she asked around the table, and no one had a cell phone on. And we asked the principal of the school who was sitting with us, "Is there Wi-Fi in this school?" We didn't even know about Wi-Fi at the time. We didn't really know what it was. And she said, yeah, we got a brand new Wi-Fi system. It's right up above your head. Isn't it great? And we realized that not only was that causing her headache at that moment, but it was probably causing our children's symptoms that they were experiencing from school, largely from school. And we started talking to other parents. And one by one, the mothers were saying, like, what are the symptoms? And so we said, well, we've researched it a bit. We're both journalists. We know how to research for truth, right? Not for rumor. So we know how to look at scientific documents. We know how to look at people whose credentials would suggest that they know what they're talking about. And the list of symptoms was quite large. It really depended on the person. With my daughter, it was a skin rash and fatigue, severe fatigue. With my son, it was there was red hot ears and irritability. And we would notice them not when we took them to school, but always when we brought them home from school at the end of the day. And one by one, the parents, mostly mothers, said, "You've just explained the last 18 months of my life. We've been going to doctor after doctor after doctor, and we can't figure it out." Some of them had headaches. Some of them had vision problems. Some of them had irritability, like we say. Some of them had restlessness. One kid couldn't sit at his desk at the school. He was constantly standing beside his desk, pacing. So a range of symptoms, but always this 18 months. So I was used to working as a journalist where you just go find the truth, tell it, fix it, move on, right? So we found the truth. We told the other parents, and there's a system in the Ontario, in my province, in the school system for what's called the parent council. And everyone by law must have a parent council, a group of half a dozen or more parents who talk about issues of the school. Mostly they're raising funds, raising money, improving the school. They're involved. So we brought this to the parent council, very interested. They brought in the principal of the school. They brought in the superintendents, who was the elected representative. But it kind of got stifled when it went up into the senior administration of the school board. They didn't want to know about it. So we had to start making a little noise about it. And what I'll do is I'll switch to a presentation that I've put together because it'll assist people in seeing what we have here. And I just want to make sure that I can find, whoops. Now what have I done? I have to find my my slideshow. Not sure if you can see it. Vert view. My apologies. Can you see it yet?
Not
Can
yet.
you see the slideshow?
Not yet.
Not yet, no.
Can't see it yet. Okay. Just a moment. I'll try to share it. So I think I have to share the screen. And, and then I'll... No, I have to open my PDF. My apologies. I thought this was going smoothly. We did have a rehearsal and it doesn't seem to have done anything.
Don't worry, take your time.
Okay.
It was there just before, right?
Tell me when you can see it.
Nope.
Not yet.
Page preview, presentation. It's funny I can't share it with you for some reason.
Press share and then in the bottom of the...
Yeah, it's not coming up for the share because I have to open it, I think.
Yes, open the document first, the presentation first.
I'll try it again the way I did it before here. My Wi-Fi file is very large. There we go.
Now press share.
It still isn't allowing me to do it, unfortunately. Oh, wait a minute.
There you go. It's coming up. Yes.
How's that?
Now we can see. Now
okay.
you can present, but you will not be able to see us.
So when we didn't get any luck from the school board, we decided to call the media because we had by this point probably 20 parents in our school saying their children had developed a symptomology in the last 18 months. And then we found out it was consistent with when they installed the Wi-Fi. So this Wi-Fi was a very powerful Wi-Fi system. And there were kids who were talking about how they felt. They couldn't be in the school. They felt sick to be in the school, sick in their heads, in their stomach, and their whole body. So I knew one of the ways to get the press interested was to tell them an absolutely fantastical story that was true and verifiable. And they came and they did stories. So this was one about from the Canadian Press, which is a wire service in Canada. And they talked about how the Wi-Fi was causing the children these symptoms. And then there was a documentary made on CBC television, another one made on global television. There were journalists descending on this school to do stories about it. And we thought that that would bring enough pressure on the school board to simply allow us to put hardwired connections in the school. That's all we asked. It turned out there were only 7 laptops in the school using the Wi-Fi. So we said, well, first we could hardwire those, or we could bring in a smaller Wi-Fi system to simply run those 7 computers. They were running systems that were so powerful that they would run, each one in every classroom would run 30 computers downloading video simultaneously. So this required a very high energetic output, and that's what was affecting the kids, because the kids are small and they get affected more than adults. So it's much, much more powerful. That's the thing that some people said, what? I got Wi-Fi in my home. It doesn't bother me. But that operates between 1 and 4 computers, probably. If there's too many computers on it, it slows down. Not these ones. This was the Lamborghini of Wi-Fi systems. This was super powerful. It was always on. There were access points in every classroom, and it was causing health problems with the children. Here's one example of a boy who had to come to school like this with a heart monitor on, because he had been gone to his doctor and they couldn't figure out what was causing his heart problems. They'd gone to a cardiologist, a specialist. The system in Canada is that you first have to go to your home doctor, and then they refer you to a specialist. And this boy's cardiologist couldn't figure out why he was having what was called erratic tachycardia, meaning his heart would go from a normal, say 100 beats a minute to 200, 250 beats a minute in one beat, like that. And it was happening in school. It wasn't happening at home. So they were trying to monitor his heart 24 hours with this device. There were 7 children in our little school wearing these devices to school. All different doctors, all different approaches, but the consistent commonality was the school. And it was happening when they were in the school. So we started a little group called the Simcoe County, this is our little educational district, Safe School Committee. And we took out ads on the radio to reach a broader public. And we simply, on the ads, we simply said, is your child experiencing any of the following symptoms? And people started to write in. And we were very shocked at how many wrote in and how many particularly heart problems. And then we found out that shortly after the Wi-Fi system went in, there were 2 kids who died from cardiac arrest in the school in our county. Now, this is not a big area. There are maybe 50,000 children in the school, in the whole area, and all the schools put together. And to have 2 kids die in a school from cardiac arrest, I thought was unheard of. Then there was another kid that had a cardiac arrest. They got to him in time. These were almost all in gym class, by the way. And they got to him in time. They pumped him back, his life back into him. They got the ambulance. They took him to a Sick Children's Hospital, which is a world famous hospital in Toronto. And they put a defibrillator in his chest, 15-year-old kid. Another one had a cardiac arrest. And they put the police came in, they got the electrical paddles, and they, shocked him back to life. And he got a pacemaker at 14 years old put into his heart. And I started thinking, wow, this is really odd. This many kids are having this same heart problem and always at the schools. So as a journalist, your suspicion and your gut guides your question line. It doesn't determine what's going on. So my question line was, why is it happening? Well, let's go to some experts. So I found an expert, a professor named Dr. Magda Havis in Ontario, our province, who had a very, very strong professional history. About probably 30 some years prior, she basically discovered acid rain, which was a very bad problem in our province and in northern United States. And they were correlated. The industries on the 2 sides of the border were causing the acidification of the rain, which was causing plants to die. And she did some early studies on that, and her science led to public policy between Canada and the United States in a very rare bilateral legislation to curb pollution in the late 1980s. So I thought, wow, this woman really knows her stuff. She knows how to figure something out, tell people about it, and get it done. So she had shifted her focus to electromagnetic field radiation and its effect on biological systems, particularly humans. And she said, well, yes, this is a problem, and there is a lot of science behind it. So she started to show us the science, and then we started realizing that this is affecting the kids. So what I did is I made a video of the kids talking about their issues, the older kids, not the 4-year-olds like my daughter, but the older kids in the same school, like the 11, 12, 13-year-olds. And we took it to the school board. And I'm going to play you the video. It's only a few minutes long, but listen to, these are kids and moms at my kids' school talking about it.
Hi, I'm Austin Lamont, and I'm 14 years old. I go to Mountain View School. I've been suffering weird headaches and dizziness and displacement. Like, it feels like my head is like there's a lot of pressure in my head, and it's like repulsing like this. And I just feel like displaced, and when I'm not there, if nothing happens. So, and like, I get really like weak, and like it's hard to hold a pencil too, and I can't think straight.
Starting this year at Mountain View, I've been getting a lot of headaches, and it's been making me really dizzy, and like it feels like I can't concentrate, and feel like
sorry.
Like you're not really there. It's hard to explain.
The thing that would concern us was that she always got better when she got home. And we couldn't figure out what was going on. We got her eyes checked and found out that wasn't it. And actually had everything checked and found out that wasn't it. And she still, to this day, when she goes to class, probably about 4 out of the 5 days that she's there, she's coming home with a headache. And I mean a significant headache where she has to take Tylenol or Advil.
My children, they are students at Mountain View School. And in the last couple of years, I've noticed that my children have had headaches, which concerns me because I don't know many children that do get headaches.
My name is Gigi. Mountain View parents have 2 kids at Mountain View. One is in grade 6, one is SK. My concerns are Georgia used to complain of headaches while in school. So then I decided, okay, take the next step, go to the doctor. So we went and saw the doctor. She interviewed Georgia and asked, if these headaches occurred while in school, at home, and the outcome was they were only occurring while she was at school. They weren't occurring on the weekends, and now being in a portable, nothing, no headaches. So, what do you say about that? Strange.
As a parent, I wonder, how does it compare to a cell phone tower, for example? We've read these studies that show that living within 300 or 400 meters of a cell phone tower can increase your chance of all kinds of ailments, headaches, dizziness, even cancer and leukemia. What if you measured that? And then what about at our school? Could you measure what the microwaves are at our school where the kids are sitting every day? Even if you measured outside of the windows, right where the kids are sitting in the kindergarten class, could you detect microwaves?
Since I found out about the Wi-Fi and some of the symptoms, it makes me think that we don't know enough, and that maybe we should be cautious, and before it's completely proven safe, I would really choose to hardwire all of our computers, which does the same job that the Wi-Fi does.
About 2 years ago, my son started getting some strange sensations, and it was usually at nighttime. It would last about 10 or 15 minutes.
I had my eyes, everything looked big, and when my mom talked in bed, everything sounded really, really loud.
his bedroom was right over where we kept our computer, I realized later, but he would get really strange sensations at bedtime, and he would call it the weird brain thing. And I'd ask him to describe it to me, and he would describe it as the windows and doors were changing shape, and my voice was getting louder and softer. So his perceptions were quite distorted, and I was worried, and I suspected it was the computer. One day I called the phone company, and I just said I wanted to switch to cable, and it was just a matter of changing the modem. He's never had that weird brain thing again, ever.
The computer was right under me, so it was pretty obvious.
Now, I also thought it was pretty obvious, but when we showed that to the school board, they were not interested in what the children had to say. They were not interested in what the parents had to say. They reverted to something called Safety Code 6, which is the Canadian document that measures or sets a standard or a guideline for the safety of any type of radiation, be it X-rays, be it microwaves. And this document is outdated, like all of them are around the world, as I'm sure you and your viewers know, that it was designed in the 1970s around microwave ovens. When they became into the home, they went from basically a broadcast medium of microwave to a cooking medium microwave. And then that became a common household good. And the standard was that it had to cook your skin. It has to raise skin temperature by +1 degrees Celsius in order to be considered harmful. So basically, if they weren't cooking the kids, they said they were fine, but that's clearly not the case. These were lower limits than that, although my son did have very hot ears, and you could make an argument that that was cooking the skin. So they didn't do anything, and they didn't really allow the parents to hardwire. They didn't allow us to take out the Wi-Fi. They said, no, this is the school. Your kids are going to go in there. They're going to be exposed to Wi-Fi, and we don't care if they're complaining. That was simply it. They didn't ask, what can we do? Can we examine it further? Nothing. They simply disregarded all of those children. Some of the staff of the school board actually swiveled their chairs around and didn't even look at the video, as if to someday in the future they could say, I didn't see it. So we were very disappointed. And then the reason I'm showing you this slide on radiation health and safety consulting is because quietly after the presentation, they sent a guy into the school to measure for microwave radiation. And we believe that their intention was to find levels below the Safety Code 6 limit so that they could then reduce their own potential liability.
Excuse me, Rodney.
Yes?
We are seeing your first slide.
You're seeing my first slide.
Yeah.
Okay, 1 second.
Now you need to present this slide. F5.
F5?
F5. So you present. Yeah. Now we are seeing. Did you know guidelines exceeding school with Wi-Fi? We are seeing this slide.
You're seeing this now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Dr. Tony Muck, but
yes.
it's not full screen, but it's okay.
Well, there's something's happened. Maybe I could start over then. I don't know. I think I've got 2 of them up, maybe. 1 second.
You press F5? No.
I pressed F5, but then it
now you press arrow forward to move the slides on. Let's see.
I think I'm going to have to start it over. I apologize. I don't know what happened. Do you want to save the changes?
Yeah. Maybe you can start over. Yes.
You see it now?
Now you took off the presentation.
Is it there?
No, you remove it. Now you need to share again. Yeah, appear. Yeah. Now we are seeing your first slide.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't need to watch full screen. We can do like this.
Okay, so so they brought this guy in to test, and they didn't tell the parents. We had to find out from one of the teachers who secretly told us that there was somebody in there testing. And then we found out this very interesting thing. The levels of microwave radiation in the school exceeded the Safety Code 6 cooking limit by 34%. This was shocking, but not surprising. Shocking that they didn't tell us. Shocking that they kept it secret. Shocking that they tried to bury the report without us knowing, but not surprising. So one of the little boys in our school, the one that had the heart monitor, I showed you his photo, he actually had a cardiac event in the school one day. His mother was in there with him. He was in a special learning class in the morning for one session before he went to the rest of the group. And we did find that a lot of these kids were kind of special needs kids. They were a little on the autism scale. Maybe they were a little from like a not so affluent household. And we found out later from a cardiologist named Dr. Steven Sinatra that there wouldn't be Wi-Fi alone causing these cardiac events. But if you took a kid who was maybe underfed, maybe had an undiagnosed heart condition, maybe didn't eat breakfast that morning or had too much sugar, and then went into a high Wi-Fi environment plus had a gym class, all of that together would cause a severe cardiac event. But this boy had an uncontrollable tachycardia. His mother could see his heart pounding through his shirt. All of a sudden, he went white. She asked him what was wrong. He was unable to respond. She took his hand and took him outside, at which point he took a deep breath and said, "I feel better now." So she sent him home for the day. And in that very room where that boy had that event that I just described, the microwave levels were 34% higher than what is required to begin cooking a human. And that was just from Wi-Fi. So on this, if you look down the right side, number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, Safety Code 6 equals 1. So for the purpose of this test, it was 1. When they tested the very first location 1, room 104A, at the bottom it says in contact display bottom. That means touching the computer, which is how a person uses a computer. You touch it. They got a 1.34, meaning 34% higher than Safety Code 6 limit. Now, I'm a manufacturer and I understand safety standard testing. So if you got a result like that, your next obligation is to try to repeat the result. Open up a second computer. See what happens when you're running 2 Wi-Fis, not just one. Is it double? Is it triple? Is it 4 times? What happens? So they didn't do that. Instead, they moved on to the next room. And they didn't put the device in contact with anything again. So this was basically designed to make sure the subsequent results were lower. But even when you see number 4, HRV is heart rate variability. So Wi-Fi has been shown in scientific studies to affect the human heart rate at 0.003 of the maximum. So we were well above that in every reading, except for one is 0.001. But most of these readings are well above 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times above those readings. And that was coming from the Wi-Fi. So here we had a perfect detective story. There was problems among many parents trying to figure out what was wrong with their kids. We had asked a couple of questions and determined when it started. We had found an environmental factor that was added to their environment that's consistent with the timing of the onset of the symptoms. We eliminated the probable causes, meaning a new renovation with paints and glues, and we eliminated the probability of mold because we had a dry school made of cinder block. There's no mold in it. You could see it. There's not even drywall in the school. So there's nothing to look behind. You could see if there was any mold. There was none. And we had this Wi-Fi thing. So we tested it, and there's the results. Bingo. Mystery solved.
Excuse me, Rodney.
Yeah.
We still in your first slide. Sorry.
Well, I don't know what to
just
do.
pass the slides forward. So yeah, now we are seeing biological effects and health implications. So you need to pass the slides, otherwise we will not see. We are seeing the one that say biological effects and health implications of microwave radiation. Now we are seeing live blood and blood.
Okay, good. Okay, so I'll leave it like this.
You need to pass the slides, otherwise we will not see.
Can you see it now?
Biological effects and health implications of microwave. Yeah,
that's the one I'm going to now. Perfect. Okay.
Thank you.
So we looked at, again, we went back to Dr. Magda Havas and mentioned this, and she said, yes, well, there's studies back to 1969, like this one, that shows that heart rate is affected by radio waves. So this was well established in the scientific literature. She also showed us what happens in more modern technology, where you can look at live blood under a microscope. And on the left, you've got red blood cells. And you see how they're kind of individual. There's a little light around all of them. After 10 minutes of Wi-Fi, they clump. It's called rouleau formation. And that means they're not processing oxygen like they should. So that would account for fatigue or any other range of symptoms. And that's after only 10 minutes of Wi-Fi on a regular Wi-Fi, not this super duper supercharged Wi-Fi that we had in our school. We did a little more research, and we found out that the sudden death in athletes had been going up quite dramatically since about the mid-90s, which is the onset of regular use of cell phones. 2000 was when Wi-Fi started to become more common. So there was a consistency across the board. This is an American study of people having otherwise really healthy people. We're talking about athletes here. Sudden cardiac arrest causing death. In the peer-reviewed medical journal Neurology, according to the National Stroke Association, the rise among younger adults of strokes was consistent with the onset of cell phones and Wi-Fi in our society. And even 8 or 10 years before we were talking about this, there was a group of Germans. This is called the Freiberger Appeal. This is a group of scientists and medical doctors who had started noticing this very quickly in Germany, and made an appeal to their government that said that we're noticing behavioral disorders, learning problems, concentration, heart attacks and strokes among an increasing younger population, headaches, migraines, exhaustion, agitation. This is exactly the symptoms that were going on in my own house with my 2 kids, as well as throughout the school. So again, my approach was not as a scientist, not as a medical doctor, as an inquisitive parent, but I had training as a journalist at a very high level, and I had a lot of experience. And when I see that there's a group of German doctors putting their names on an appeal describing these symptoms 10 years prior to us noticing them, I realized, well, we're part of this. This is a thing that happens. This is a thing that's been recognized. It's clearly an emerging issue, and there's not a lot of government regulation around it. In fact, none. So it's very, very possible. So there's only 2 possibilities to stop the symptoms. You can give them as many pills as you want. You're just going to cause more problems. The pills aren't going to work because you haven't removed the adjutant. You have to stop exposing them to the thing that's making them symptomatic. And there's only 2 ways to do that. Turn it off, or don't send them into the school anymore. So they wouldn't turn it off. So we had to take our kids out of school. We couldn't send our children into a dangerous environment every day in any good conscience. And there's, you react instinctively as a parent to danger posed against your children. So instinctively, I couldn't take my kids to school. There were other children who wouldn't go to school, 5-year-olds whose parents opened the car door and said, go. And they get about as far as the school door and they turn around and run back crying. And the parents didn't know why. And the kid didn't know why either, but they knew as soon as they opened that door, they felt different. So we started to then approaching our politicians at a higher level. And this is something called HESA, which is the Standing Committee on Health. The way the Canadian parliamentary system works is that there are committees that are constant. There's a committee on health. There is any of the federal responsibilities. So the Committee on Health meets, and the parliamentarians who are elected to represent their ridings in Ottawa, in Canada, will assign members to it. So there may be 10 of them. And they had a special hearing, 2 or 3 days of hearings, on radio frequency electromagnetic radiation and the health of Canadians. And this was in 2015. So there had been one prior that I spoke at, and I told them again, I said, I'm not a scientist, and there are physicists on the panel. There are the head of the radiation protection branch for Health Canada was on the panel sitting next to me. She wasn't a physicist, actually. She was a pharmacist, but nonetheless, she held the position and had more science background than I did. So I simply told the story that I just told you. I said, I'm going to tell you what I've observed among the children at this one school since the Wi-Fi went in, and you tell me whether you think it's acceptable or not. So they didn't do a whole lot after that one, but then there were Canadians for Safe Technology formed in the interim with a great Canadian named Frank Clegg, who has got an extensive business background. He ran Microsoft Canada for about 15 years. He then went on to work as a public health advocate in his hometown to stop a gas liquefaction plant, an energy plant that used natural gas, which had a very, very dangerous potential to destroy the neighborhood if there was an accident. And he stopped that from happening. It was a very famous story in Canada. Some politicians had to resign from it, and there was criminal prosecutions over it because it never should have been in the first place. He then turned his attention due to some situations in his family with electrical sensitivity. He became very aware of it, and he turned his attention to this, and he hasn't stopped since, and he's done great work. One of the things that he did is something that I couldn't. He helped to organize in a very official way a approach to the politicians. And when they got to the second hearing of the Health Committee, they actually put forth 12 recommendations to the Government of Canada. And my favorite was recommendation 4, which was one of them that was suggested by Dr. Magda Havis, which was that the Canadian Medical Association, the College of Physicians and Surgeons, the College of Families of Physicians, in other words, the regulatory bodies around our doctors, be informed that of the new science, the emerging science, and that they go around Health Canada, because Health Canada was not doing its job. In my view, it's been captured and corrupted, but that's my view. That's not the view of the government. So that they go around Health Canada and they simply go right to the doctors and tell them, these are the symptoms that have been proven in science to occur. If you have a child presenting in your clinic with symptoms that are otherwise unexplainable, that are on this list, ask them about the Wi-Fi and the wireless radiation devices in their life. Ask the parents to minimize or eliminate them for a period of time and see if the symptoms subside, because that's the approach to environmental medicine. So these were written up, stamped, approved by the committee, sent to Parliament, and they have been ignored by our Prime Minister Trudeau every day since. Nothing has happened. Nothing has changed. They're only continuing to roll out more Wi-Fi in the schools. So what was I to do? What alternative did I have? There were all these fiber optic cables, plug the thing in, use power line adapters. None of it was being considered by the school board. They were not interested. They had a mission and they were moving forward with it. So I took my kids out of the school, and after a year of homeschooling, there was a little independent school across the street, and I had sponsored a child to go there before, so I was familiar with the headmaster. I knew her. I asked her if there was Wi-Fi in the school, and she said, we just built this school. It's totally hardwired. We have 3 tiny little Wi-Fi transmitters. And I said, if you'll take them out and let me hardwire the rest of the school, I'll enroll my kids. And she said, that sounds like a good idea. I think all the children could benefit from that. I've heard the news of what's happening, and I agree with it. And what she agreed with was not a conclusion that it was causing the problem, but that there was enough evidence that it may cause harm to prudently remove it and for the sake of the children. During the course of my public advocacy about this, the World Health Organization added radio frequency radiation to the list of possible carcinogenic agents, which include lead and car exhaust. So I pointed out to the school board that we do our level best to minimize children's exposure to car exhaust. There are signs that say, don't idle your car while you're waiting to pick up your kid. You're polluting the air. We don't expose them to lead in the school if we can. And in particular, we don't forcibly and mandatorily expose them to these possible carcinogens 6 hours a day when they're in school. The notion that we would expose them to anything else on that list without their consent and to force them to be exposed to, for example, to an idling car into the classroom or to lead on their hands or their fingers or a device or the cups they drink out of, and then we would force them and not let them opt out is horrific. It's unconscionable. It's totalitarian. But that is what's happening with the use of Wi-Fi in the schools in my district, and I think pretty much everyone around the world now. So this school has no Wi-Fi. None. There's no Wi-Fi transmitter in the school, and the teachers have it in their contracts that they're not allowed to generate a Wi-Fi hotspot in the school. It's in their contract. It's a firing offense. So they know not to. So this is what a classroom looks like with hardwired connections. Not that different from any classroom, really, except you see a few wires there. And I'll show you how it works. So, whoops. One of these is a video. I should be able to get it going. So here's the classroom, and there's a laptop, and a lot of laptops don't even have LAN ports anymore. So we have a little USB adapter with the LAN port plugged in, and then it just goes over about 6 feet onto a port. So this desk has all the ports on it, and you can, if they're not sitting at that desk, then they have a line over to the laptop, and that's it. They're on the internet. The teachers love it because they say, at least I know when they're on the internet and when they're not. So the high school kids, now I see that's on, it's got a Google up. It's on the internet, on the screen. And now if they're on this side of the classroom, so we don't create tripping hazards, they go over to the other side. So there are equal number of ports on the other side. So there's 2 every, say, 6 feet or so. And that's enough for every kid in this classroom to be able to plug in to the internet if they need it. If they don't need it, they're not plugged in and they're paying attention to their teacher. Now, not every classroom is the same. Across the hall, there's a different classroom. Let me just see if I can get to my next slide here. This is a different classroom. This is a science classroom. You'll see along the left side, the sinks, and at the front desk, there's a gas outlet. This is grade high school science standard. Now, these white poles in the middle of the room are to bring the wires to the center of the room. So here we have the wires in the center of the room, and I just want to see which one of these is my video. There it is. So I'll take you for a little tour of this room. So if you look up to the top of these things, you have blue internet wires and shielded electrical cable for the power for the laptop. It comes down into the bottom, and at the bottom of the pole, there are LAN ports. There's 4 LAN ports on that side, and on the other side, you can plug in your laptop to get power. So that way the cords aren't running all over the floor in the room, and there's not a trip hazard. So this is like maybe $5,000 to do this, to get the electricians in, to get the materials. All of these materials came from a standard electrical supply store. The electrician took a day, and they wired that up. And so now the kids, they've got a few poles in the classroom, but they're not going home sick. They don't have headaches. They don't have nausea. They don't have vertigo. And the school is hardwired entirely. Occasionally we get new parents in who maybe are in the industry of wireless, or they're in the tech industry, or they're just really fashionable people who are kind of addicted to the latest thing. And they say, oh, your school's going to fall behind. Students are going to fall behind if you don't have Wi-Fi. But we try to explain that Wi-Fi has no value. The internet has great potential value, but the Wi-Fi is simply a method to connect to it. If you connect to a wire, you still get all the value, and you get none of the harm or the potential harm or the harm to some of the kids. And there's unknown harm as well. I mean, we know from the science that Wi-Fi from a simple laptop affects male reproductive material in as little as 2 hours. So what's it doing to the female reproductive material? And it's important to note, and I learned this from reading the science when I went down this whole research project, that almost all fertility research is done on male reproductive material, not female, because it is accessible and without surgery, right? So fertility clinics, and actually it was a South American fertility clinic, I believe in Ecuador, which simply, I mean, they got fridges full of the stuff, right? So they just started doing tests on it. And they found this amazing thing. They got double helix DNA damage from a simple laptop 2 inches away from the material, which is roughly how we use the thing. And they published the study in the gold standard journals called Fertility and Sterility. And they presented it at the annual conference in America right around the time we were doing this stuff. So the science was emerging and we were learning about it. But this, we don't know if this is going to cause sterility in kids. They're too young. And you may never know, because human reproductive failure is a massive problem right now. And you won't really know what caused it. What, did this cause it? You'll never know until the end. So the other thing that we have in our school is a dramatic success in science, mathematics, and art. So our kids, for example, the town here had a contest for all the kids in town to design a flag for the library. It was won by a kid for our school. And now our kids' flag design hangs over the city library. There's the University of Waterloo is known really North America wide as a mathematics school, right up there with Stanford. And it's the training ground for Research in Motion, which makes BlackBerry. And their computer science school is one of the top in the world. They hold annual mathematical examinations for high school students as a competition. And our school wins in Ontario, or in our zone, almost every year, every second year. Our little school, which only graduates probably 20 kids a year, wins the math competition compared against all of the country. There's a science fair system where you have a school-wide science fair, and then you go to your county, and then as you win, you progress. Every year, our county sends 7 kids to the National Science Fair, and every year, half of those kids are from our school. That's from the whole county of 50,000 potential kids. Half of them are from our little school, and they go on to win. And several of the kids make their projects into businesses, high-tech businesses. One of them has a company called Hear Me Cheer, which is a COVID related thing where, because the sports stadiums are empty from fans, he developed a system where they would simply utilize the microphone on a laptop, and you log in and watch your favorite sports team, and you can yell at the screen and yell, "Yeah, you're a bum," or "Yeah, you're great." And presumably, if you got 20,000 people doing this, it's broadcast into the stadium, and the players hear the fans cheering for them. So that was developed by a kid who graduated Pretty River Academy 3 years ago. And it's now a company. There's another kid that developed a system using infrared detection on vital sign monitoring for hospital. He did it as his grade 12 science fair. He won a gold medal at the Canada-wide science fair, and now he has 12 employees running this business. He's not even through engineering school yet. So the wireless did not diminish the potential of the children to succeed in math and science. In fact, they're the top kids in Canada from this tiny little school. So we're left with, what do we do? We have a situation where we can do like the public school system in Ontario, in Canada, which does nothing, simply hides from the problem, turns their back when we show the kids begging for mercy. I think it's fair to say the parents and the children in that video were begging for mercy. And they simply at the school board said, we don't care. The present situation in this graphic that you look at, there's a water line. So the amount of Wi-Fi and its effect on your body depends on your physical size. So a big guy like me, I stand 6'2". I'm basically unaffected by this stuff. I don't like a cell phone on my head, but I'm basically I'm unaffected by this stuff. But that same level, as the person gets smaller and smaller and smaller, they can't help but being affected. So what we're doing is basically nothing right now. And as we raise the level of Wi-Fi in the schools, in our homes, you know, your fridge and your stove now have Wi-Fi signals on them, then you're going to start to affect more and more people. And the smaller people will have no hope. Or we can start to lower it. We can do something prudent. We can realize, yes, this is a technology that's got a purpose, but it's also got a potential harm. We need to lower it where we can, when we can, so that the smallest among us can be protected. And it's every parent's natural instinct to protect the children, but it is not a societal natural instinct to protect children. I've noticed this, that the children have no voice. And the Wi-Fi was put in and they started reacting and nobody did anything. Nobody cared. So it's up to us adults to do something about it. And at one point, I was invited to the Royal Society of Canada to speak about the problem that occurred at the school. And what we heard was this kind of snickering, oh, well, kids will do anything to get out of school. And I correct people on that. The one thing that comes instinctive to every child, every 5-year-old, is to tell the truth. They know to tell the truth. They get upset when there's a lie. They speak up and yell about it. And there's so much lying going on about the safety effects or the health effects and the lack of safety of Wi-Fi that I say we all have to stand up and start acting like 5-year-olds again. And we have to tell the truth. The scientists have to tell the truth. The government has to tell the truth. We have to say, yes, we've created a problem and we have to start addressing it. So I'm going to unshare this now.
Excellent. That's amazing. And you're totally right about telling the truth. And you have like a great courage to put on national television in Canada. And I remember watching it in 2010 when I had just married. And I thought when my kids got to the age to go to school, you know, that problem would have been solved. And then after having my kids and being pregnant, I developed EHS, and my kids had developed symptoms in a school in Toronto. And thank God I found Pretty River because of all the work you had done before. So it was a great time we spent there in Pretty River, and it's amazing the work you've done and the exact example you are setting up to other schools in having, you know, new policies, safe technology policies for the use of technology inside the schools for the safety of their health, not only physical health, but also mental health. So thank you, Rodney, for addressing it since the beginning.
Well, thank you for saying so. Is that Giorgio? That's Lorenzo.
That's Lorenzo. Come say hi.
Yeah, remember?
Come here.
Remember?
Hi, Lorenzo. There's Giorgio. Wow, they're big boys now. I haven't seen them in a couple of years.
They miss Pretty River so much.
Pretty River is a full school now. You are most welcome to come back anytime if you return to Canada. You know, in the end, I was kind of like a football player running up the field and just going for an opening wherever it was, you know. Some other parents said, yeah, this is happening to us too. Okay, let's talk to them. There was a school council. I didn't know what that was. Okay, let's go on there. There's a school board. Let's talk to them. There's a health committee. Let's go talk to them. There's the Royal Society. Let's go talk to them. I just kept telling the truth. I kept telling the story as I observed it, and it was verifiable, but none of it worked. It was just brick wall, brick wall, brick wall. But then this little school, there it was, right across the street from, we live out kind of on the edge of town. Our kids were busing into school. But there was this little independent school literally right across the street from our house. Our kids could finally walk to school, even though they lived on the edge of town. And that was the potential. Now, little did I know that because it was a new school with a new building and they were suffering financially, if I asked to paint that school pink, they'd let me if I put my kids in and paid tuition. So they may not have had the same conviction about the Wi-Fi, but I'll tell you, that headmaster, we made news about it. When they took the Wi-Fi out, we publicized it. And the media came and said, hey, well, look, here's a school that's taking the Wi-Fi out. That's big. That headmaster went on the radio for 2 hours one day on a radio phone-in show and defended it. And she kept saying, when people challenged her on it, she said, I don't have to know the answer. I only have to know that taking it out doesn't harm the children. And I'm not harming the children. And if putting it in might harm them, I'm taking it out. And if taking it out doesn't affect their access to computers, there's no loss. It was awesome. She was a very highly educated, highly trained principal, and she just took the smart road and got behind it. And I'll never forget her for it. She did an amazing job. And now today the school is thriving. And I remember the last time I now am the chairman of the board of directors of that school, because if you hang around long enough, they put you on the board of directors. So the last time I addressed the parent population, there was one parent who was complaining about no Wi-Fi. And I was surprised. I didn't have to say anything. There were parents all across the room speaking up. You know, they don't allow it in France. You know, they're getting rid of it there. You know, it's on the World Health Organization list. And the whole room was educated about it. So I just had to smile and say, I go with what they say.
Rodney, I have a question.
Sure.
How's the Canadian mainstream media report the fact that the school took off the Wi-Fi? Not the small TV channels or alternative newspapers, but the mainstream media. I don't know if it got there, but how you see the mainstream media reporting or talking about something like taking the Wi-Fi out? Because I don't know in Brazil, but I don't know how it's in Canada, but in Brazil, most of mainstream media talks about Wi-Fi as a progress, as modernity, as going to the future, and internet everywhere, internet by satellite. So how you see that?
Well, that's a very, very good question, Fabiano. And the reason the media talks about that is because they're told to talk about that. The media doesn't decide that this one thing is awesome. They're given a news release. They're approached by somebody working in the industry. This is how industries work. They employ people. They pay them a lot of money to get the story in the news. So I just did the same thing. I know how it works. I was a journalist for 20 years. So they reported what I told them to report. So, for example, when the first year I was there that our school swept the local science fair awards, I put out a news release. Low-tech school wins high-tech prize. Great headline. Throw that in the news. And then they send a reporter down. And now they don't necessarily talk about how the school has no Wi-Fi, but they do reinforce that we are a scientific school winning scientific prizes. So I belabored that on a number of occasions. And any chance I get to promote the school, I slip in Wi-Fi free school and then end the sentence there, you know, accomplishes some great thing. So I reinforce it regularly in these news releases. Eventually they tire of it. They go, oh, we've reported about that school so many times. News wants something new. That's their thing. But make no mistake, the positive reporting about wireless has nothing to do with it. It has everything to do with selling it.
Yes, that's a very smart communicational strategy. You know, low-tech school win a prize of scientific achievement or something. That's very, very smart. Very, very smart. And I'm sure the news all over the world would like to use that. We need to,
you know, there's something else, Fabiano, that happens. Remember I told you about those kids going to the school and then they would open the door and then they would run back to their mom's car. So when I first came on as chairman of the board, the school was undergoing some financial difficulties and we needed to get more kids in. So every year I noticed in September, we'd start the very first day of school with maybe 5 kids in the kindergarten class. And by the 30th of September, we'd have 10 kids. So I said, well, how come they don't enlist in the summertime? Why do they come mid-September? Like our school starts right after Labor Day in September. And the teacher would always say, oh, the mother said the child was suffering from anxiety in kindergarten class. Now, I don't remember suffering anxiety in kindergarten class. I remember wanting to go to kindergarten, be with all those kids. You know, this is great. This is fun. I don't want to go home. So I think what was happening is a certain number of kids were getting that erratic tachycardia. That tachycardia, that sudden feeling is what happens when you get anxious, right? If all of a sudden a car swerves into your lane, you know, if all of a sudden your kid falls, you know, but if nothing happens and the Wi-Fi is causing that thing, you confuse it for stress. You confuse it for anxiety. It's natural. So when they come to our school, there's no Wi-Fi, 0. So the kid walks in and they're normal. They like school. So the mother says, wow, you must have the greatest kindergarten teacher in the world, which we do. But I think it's because there's no stress to their heart in our school. And we notice that every year. And the story's almost always the same. After 3 days, my kid won't go to school. My kid dropped out of school. And we used to hear it. One of the kids who's now an engineering champion, who's a graduate from our school, who has that hospital monitoring system that he invented, he dropped out of school. His parents tell this story. He dropped out in grade 7. What kid drops out of school in grade 7? Some drop out in high school, you know, grade 10. You're not a very good learner. Maybe you're dyslexic. It's undiagnosed. You got a construction job. You can make money.
Grade 1.
You know, yours dropped out in grade 1. Then is that what you're saying, Daniela? Yeah, similar thing, right? Now, I happen to know because I know Daniela, that at her school, the Wi-Fi was extremely powerful. And when her and her husband were saying, you know, they came to me first and said, how do we get our school to get rid of the Wi-Fi? Maybe we bring in all the speakers you brought in. Maybe we invite some really big famous people to come in and talk about it. And I had to point out, this was a very famous school in Toronto. And I said, you know, that school's been successful for a very long time. They would have to decide that having no Wi-Fi is a better marketing strategy than having the fastest Wi-Fi on the planet. And that's where they're going to go. They're only going to keep putting in more Wi-Fi. And that's the problem, is they see it as a technological novel advantage. And they don't realize that it's affecting these kids in a negative way. There's another school in Toronto where another person I know through this whole movement sent their daughter, and it was a girls' school. And her daughter was getting these headaches, and then she was getting these fainting spells directly under the transmitters in the hallway. And when she went to talk to the principal about it, she noticed there was 2 bowls of medicine on the principal's desk. One was a bowl of single-use Tylenol, and one was a bowl of single-use aspirin. And she says, why do you have these bowls here? She says, well, I like to offer a variety to the children. She says, no. Why do you have aspirin and Tylenol on your desk? She says, well, the kids come in with headaches and they just take them and they go on, they're fine. So the problem of headaches in this school was so rampant that they got a pharmaceutical solution to it. But the solution was simply turn off the Wi-Fi and all the headaches would go away. And this is happening worldwide. This is happening in every doctor's offices. There are children presenting, and because the doctors haven't been told that radio frequency can cause these symptoms, they're going to prescribe a pill because that's what's in their arsenal. So most likely we have a vastly overprescribed pediatric population right now around the world, in Brazil, in Canada, everywhere else.
Yes, and the thing is, as you said, the people have no idea what is going on, right? And they think that the children are getting sick, that it's kind of something that it's part of the modern world to get sick, so we might as well get used to it. I feel this where I live here in São Carlos. People say, just take a pill, you will feel better. Don't worry about it. It's very complicated, the situation, because if we don't think, especially for children, because children, they don't have the past like we do. Like, how was the world before this? I think people are just getting used to things and accepting them so easily. Yeah, of course, there are people like what you did was fantastic. I know there are people that are lights that are, because I think people are walking like they were almost blind, in this situation, and it's very scary.
You said something just now that triggered a thought. They don't know what's causing it because it's everywhere. But if you can create a wireless free zone in your home, then they'll know the difference. They'll know that they feel good at home. You create a nest. So when I worked in my early career, I worked at the CBC, Canadian Broadcasting, and they were located in about 20 some buildings downtown Toronto. And they moved into a big new 10-story building. And that big new 10-story building was, the carpets were laid and the paint was put in on a Sunday, and we all moved in on a Monday, and a whole bunch of us got sick. So I was kind of aware that this was a problem. I found a doctor that identified it, and he said, "Oh, you're like the 40th patient I've got from the CBC. You're all coming into my clinic because you're all sick from this damn building." So he said, unless you're going to quit your job, which, journalists don't get paid a lot. We love what we do. So we weren't quitting. But he says, create a clean environment in your home, and you can recuperate when you go home to sleep. You can recuperate on the weekends. So when you create a hardwired connection, and be very careful with your appliances. You're not going to be able to get an appliance pretty soon that doesn't have a Wi-Fi. Figure out how to disable it. There's hacks on YouTube, and I've seen them because we just bought some new appliances, and my wife figured out how to go in and disable the Wi-Fi on it. It's just a little panel. They just take out the wire and it's gone. So if you create that environment at home, your kids will know that there is potential for a clean environment. So then when they're out, they might be aware of what's causing it. It might be as simple as, you're at a restaurant, you realize the transmitter's there. Can I change tables? You go into a hotel room and the transmitter for the whole floor is right outside your room. Can I change rooms? So you can then lead your life, because stopping this thing is, with what Elon Musk is doing in space now, is getting harder and harder. All we can do is take our own personal responsibility, create our own personal sanctuary. And that way we teach our children that it's possible too.
Rodney, I learned a very important thing, what you said before about the linking low-tech school or Wi-Fi free schools with high performance in science, high performance in science competitions and other stuff, because this is always the argument of people that saying that you are against technology, you are against progress, you are against 5G because you want to come back to last century. So I think it's very smart to link Wi-Fi free schools or low-tech schools or all this kind of strategy to protect ourselves to something related with progress, with intelligence, with healthiness, with improving our skills, improving our concentration, improving our focus, all these stuff that are related with progress, because it's always the argument is like progress, future, science, economical development. People always say that all over the world. So I think it's the same in Canada. I think it's the same in all over the world. So I think I learned this is very smart what you said, to link this with something related with progress, with development. You understand?
Yes, and there are other examples. It's a good idea to start to create a branding for that. There are other examples. There's a famous one that down in in Northern California, where the near San Jose, where the high tech Silicon Valley is, there's a Montessori school that doesn't allow cell phones or Wi-Fi, and that's where all the tech guys send their kids.
Yes, exactly.
Because they know. Anybody who's in this industry knows, it's when we first started talking about it, when I made my first presentation to the school board, there was a guy making a presentation after me about some unrelated thing, but he came up to me and he goes, I work for the, we call Ontario Hydro. This is the power generation company. And he says, we've known about this for years because so many of my colleagues are dying of leukemia from electrical radiation exposure. So anybody in the industry, also when I worked at the CBC, there was 2 radio technicians who had leukemia. And this is known to be associated with electrical radiation exposure. And it was always the technicians, the guys who were all the time in the studio around all of the, the soundboards and the electrical radiation. For me, I was a journalist, so I was out in the field. I was sitting in an office. I would, when I would go to record my story, I would go into the studio, right? But I'd be in there for an hour, then I'd come out again. These guys were in there for 8, 10, 12, 15 hours, their whole career. So they're the ones that got sick. But this idea of with low tech equals achievement, also the example of this is computers were invented by people who didn't have computers. The smartest people in our history, guys like Alan Turing in England, didn't have a computer. He invented a computer. This is, the basic of learning is human connection and human interaction. And our school wouldn't be what school it is without really awesome math and science teachers. They're bloody extraordinary. It's a miracle and it's a coincidence. And Pretty River Academy, I don't always understand it. It's a collection of like-minded people who came together. It's not part of a big network of schools. There was a big network of schools that tried to buy it recently. They offered to buy it. But unfortunately, we're a charity. So there's no profit to be had. So they backed away, luckily. So it's an amazing little thing. And I think it happened because we're in a small town. We're 2 hours north of Toronto. So we're a group of people who like to be where we are. We're all of a mind, as much as any group of people are going to argue and disagree, we have a commonality of being here. And I think it's because we like to be in a little town. We like to be outdoors. We have ski hills and we're on one of the Great Lakes in Ontario. And we like the outdoors and nature. So we're all basically like-minded in some way. So even those people who feel that, like you say, wireless is the future, they're not the ones who live here. You don't have to argue with them too much. They'll come around.
I would like to know if in your school you have high school students, and if you do can they bring their cell phone to school? How does that work? Do you teach them how to use a cell phone? Or
yeah, so it's from kindergarten through grade 12, and they're not allowed to have a cell phone in the classroom. There are parents who think that, their child's going to get kidnapped at any moment, so they have to have a cell phone on with their finger on 9/11, right? So they have to stay in the locker. You're constantly policing it with high school students. Are they generating a Wi-Fi hotspot? Have they got a little Bluetooth thing on? Are they talking to their friend? So you're constantly policing it. And that's just because the rest of society allows them to be on their cell phone all the time. But one of the ways we get through to the parents is we say, your child doesn't need to be instructed by a 50-year-old man how to use a computer, right? Your kid already knows more than the teacher about the computers. So we're not teaching them how to use a computer. We're teaching them how to learn here. And your child is exposed to computers the whole time they're not at school. So they're not starved from computer exposure. And for the parents of younger children, we tell them that as your children grows older, getting your child to spend more time in front of a computer will not be a challenge for you. The challenge will be tearing them away from the addictive programs that are designed to hold their attention. So if you speak to them this way, that we're here to create a daily 6-hour oasis from the tech addiction and allow them some human communication, interaction with a teacher as a mentor, and to learn, they get it.
Amazing.
Rodney, you know that movie that went out on Netflix, Social Dilemma? I think
Yes.
this is the name in English, Social Dilemma.
That's exactly right.
I think this is one of the first movies that went more mainstream and starting to talk more widely about this subject. And I think it's a very slow process. It's similar to tobacco. Like we have like last century, the mainstream media talking good things about tobacco, that you are sexy if you smoke. Yes. Even saying that's healthy, smoking is healthy. So you have 50 years, almost half a century. Now you have the mainstream media telling more scientific, proved facts about tobacco and cigarette addiction. So what relations you see with the process of tobacco in the mainstream media in the last half century or century, and the Wi-Fi technology in the mainstream media?
Well, it's interesting you mentioned tobacco, because the wireless industry is basically starting to get under siege by scientists, some politicians, people like us. So they're using the same playbook to disparage people. These people simply don't like technology. These are the type of people, they call them Luddites, right? The Luddites in England were not against technology. They were against losing their jobs and not being able to feed their families. It's a different story, right? So we're not against technology. We're just against you poisoning our children. Fair enough. So they're using the same playbook I'm telling you, we saw a lot of interesting stuff. So for example, on the story of the reproductive clinic from Ecuador that I talked about, that did this, the presentation at the annual conference. I think it's called the American Academy of Reproductive Medicine. So all of the medical doctors dealing with this question are meeting at this annual conference. It was held, I think, in Colorado. And we were trying to put news releases out at the time, right? So we put out a little news release that because if at that conference, there might be 100 different lectures that a journalist could report on, but this one we thought we should tell them about. So we put out the news release, and sure enough, the local TV, not big national press, international anything, but the local TV went and covered it, which is enough, because then once it's been filmed, many people have access to it, right? It could go out on other stations. The comment section, where people write in snide little mean things underneath, was highly sexualized. It was ignorant. It was pornographic. It was disgusting, and it was instant. So this thing went to air saying, here's a medical doctor who runs a reproductive facility, who's done a study. It's been published in this journal. He's been invited to America to speak to these doctors about it. And these guys, I'm not going to repeat what they said, but you can imagine it was the stuff that you don't want your children to hear. All the comments came underneath. Now, where did that come from? Why did that come instantly? Who is watching TV in Denver to make those comments? 10, 15 different people. This had to be a public relations marketing firm waiting for this, or they've got an AI system to alert them. And then they were feeding the comment section to ridicule the concept and really make you not want to read it. It was the kind of thing that just, oh God, get this off my screen. So that's their playbook. That's what the professionals are doing. They're ridiculing it in any way they can. And even I've had them try to ridicule me, right? So they write a blog. They call themselves the skeptics, right? I'm a skeptic, right? So I'm presenting science. I'm presenting the story of a father. I'm presenting my credentials as a journalist. I was, very successful at what I did. And I'm delivering that to scientists. I'm working alongside scientists. I'm not pretending to be one, but I'm working with them, which is something that I did every day on the news. You presented with a story. You have to find an expert. You have to determine truth from not truth, and you have to present it. So I was very good at this. And these guys were writing stuff about I was a nut job, I was a whack job, I was a kook. So it reminds me of what I'm seeing now in a lot of different things where somebody presents a legitimate argument and you say, oh, you're just a nut. Well, wait a minute. Doesn't matter what I am. What about my argument? So what they're doing is the exact same playbook that the tobacco ran for a very long time until it became a money issue, until they were caught. And then the states that were paying for the cancer started suing them. And this also happened in Canada. The provinces started suing the tobacco companies because we have state-paid medical care here, right? So I don't know exactly how that would work, but the government is complicit. Here's what they've done that they didn't do with tobacco. This safety code 6 I described earlier, which requires your skin to heat, which is 40 years out of date. The wireless companies are not stating that their products are safe. They use different language. They say, we meet the federal guideline. And as long as they work damn hard and spend millions of dollars to keep that federal guideline from being updated, they're meeting the federal guideline. So what they do, there was a journalist named Wendy Mesley who works for Canadian Broadcasting here, and she did an amazing piece. Now, Daniela, I'm not sure if Daniela knows we've lost her or not. She did an amazing piece where she actually went to the place where they study, welcome back, Daniela, where they test the cell phones for safety. So they have a piece of leather here. Try to get it on my screen. Everything's backwards on Zoom. And it measures the absorption of the radiation. And they take the phone and they keep putting it closer and closer and closer until it exceeds the federal guideline. And then they pull it back just enough so it's a hair under, and that's where they leave it. And then they measure that distance. Say it's 20 millimeters. And they write in the small print of the phone, you must hold this 20 millimeters away from anywhere on your body, which includes my hands. So how are you going to work it? And then they bury that in fine print that you never read because you turn the phone on and it works, or they bury it in the settings somewhere you'll never find it. And they actually warn you, and 100% of cell phones and iPads have this warning that basically translate to don't touch it while it's on, or it may exceed the federal guidelines. They still don't say it's unsafe. It may exceed the federal guidelines. So this is how they're doing it, and this is how they're continuing to get away with it. And this is, so really it's not the industry that's going to pay. They've transferred all the liability to our governments, which hold our money. And so it's us that's going to pay in the end. It's the government that's going to pay. The industry has figured out a way to learn from the mistakes of tobacco, and they know they're harming us. They know. Otherwise, they'd say it's safe, because none of them have. I would challenge on this broadcast for any manufacturer of a wireless device in Brazil to come on and say it's safe. Because if they do, they're in trouble. They've assumed a liability. They don't say it's safe. They say your government has guidelines, like it or not, and we are within those guidelines. So that's what they're doing. That's their play. So it's going to be a longer arc than tobacco. It's basically giving them carte blanche to do whatever the hell they want. So, you lean on the politicians, and the problem with politicians is they tend to be orators or lawyers. It makes sense that a lawyer would become a lawmaker. They understand the process. In the case of our country, our prime minister is barely educated at all. He's a drama student. He's a great talker. Talks well, handsome as hell. But if he has to go up against anybody in Health Canada, He's not built for understanding science. He's not built for questioning science, and he's not unique. Most politicians are not scientists. Scientists, personality-wise, tend toward introversion. They love being in a lab on their own. They love writing up the report. They love the eureka moment. I have sat through medical conferences because of my business. I build a medical, or I don't build a medical device. I build a sauna that's used as a medical tool. But I sat through hundreds of medical lectures. And the one that I'll never forget was the most dead boring thing I've ever heard in my life. And he got a standing ovation. And the room wouldn't shut up, because this is the type of person that's in there. So now that you have politicians in charge, they're easy to manipulate. And the industries, and not just the wireless industry, but the pharmaceutical industry, the pesticide industry, the food industry, have captured the regulators that are in charge of regulating their industry. And this is true in the United States and Canada, throughout Europe, I'm assuming Brazil. It's the game plan across the planet. Australia, New Zealand, same story. So these companies have placed high-level executives in these regulatory positions in the government, and or they hire from the regulatory. So let's say you go up and you become a deputy minister, and you're peaking out at $211,000 a year, and they say, we'd like to pay you $10 million to come work for us, and your job is to stay in touch with all your old colleagues. So that's how it works. And it's tough to break out of that cycle that we're in right now, because that's how the world runs.
Rodney, the more the population is quiet, or the more the population is ignorant about this subject, about the pesticides, or about the toxins in the foods, or the poison of the wireless, the more the population is quiet or ignore the facts, the more they can do that, So there's a limit, I think, when the population is still distracted or uninformed, they still can do the lobby and all this industry that you said. But I think there's a limit, like it happens with tobacco. We have tobacco lobbyists, but there's a lot more knowledge of the population in general. It's something general now that cigarettes kills, cigarettes creates disease. And I think that's the point. The population needs to have the information, to know more, not to make some noise, When the population make noise, the politicians need to follow that. They cannot go against the population. There's really noise.
I think that's a really good point, Fabiano. And I would encourage anybody who's involved in this just to simply make it a daily task to contact your politicians. Because if we don't, then we're just talking to each other. And we all understand it already. So I always tell people who are complaining consistently about some problem, call your politician at all levels and let them know. Email them, ask them for a response. Because then it's on their radar. And once, it's like a new word you heard, and then all of a sudden you hear it every day. You're alerted to it. So maybe they've got a grandchild who's having a problem in kindergarten, and I wonder if that's the problem. If we just, and it's not going to be all the politicians. There will be one, there will be two, there will be, like you say, the bright lights, right? They will be the ones who turn on to it. So this is critical, and we don't all have to take to the streets. We have email, right? We can email our politicians on a regular basis and say, what have you done about this? It's legitimate to say, this is on the World Health Organization's list for possible carcinogens. Why are we forcibly exposing children to it the entire time we're there without consent or informed consent, particularly? We don't tell them. We say, we've got Wi-Fi and it's awesome. Do you tell the parents that it is on the same danger list as lead? And the ones that want to poo-poo it, they say, well, coffee's on that list too. I said, sure. Show me the class where children are forcibly drinking coffee in the kindergarten class all day long. You don't do that because coffee's bad for kids, right? So you don't do it. So why are we doing it? And if you take these things and you ask them to justify the forcible exposure to this for children on a daily basis, they will have a hard time. They might have to answer to it.
Yeah, and you said when some people start to sue the state against cigarette problems in their bodies, when the industry of tobacco had to spend a lot of money in these prosecutions, you say?
Yes.
And things start to change. I don't know if in the world happens populations suing the companies or the state to have some health problems related with wireless radiation coming from the antennas or coming from other devices. But I think in a couple years, I think it's my feeling that this will start to happen. It's somewhere in the world, it starts to so the industry will start to really, really become with fear because it's money. So I don't know if you heard about somewhere in the world. Have you noticed something that happened with a success prosecution that people got money from wireless disease?
If it happens, it'll be America, because America's system is set up with what's called tort law, which is these private lawsuits. Remember the most famous worldwide case is O.J. Simpson, who was accused of murdering 2 people, and he got off. They said you're innocent, but the family was able to sue him in private court, and he was guilty, and was supposed to pay him a bunch of money, which I don't know that he ever did. But the reason is America is such a litigious society is because the system is there to allow them to do it. And what it's designed to do is to keep people in check from negligence, willfully causing harm. So what you're seeing now, there's a couple of lawsuits in the United States. Some of them are private, where somebody has died from brain cancer, and they're making the argument that they had a phone that was given to them by their employer, and they had to use it. The other one is a combination by the Environmental Health Trust, and which is run by Deborah Davis, and the Children's Health Defense, which is run by Robert Kennedy Jr. And they have, I'm not sure of the details of it, but they've joined in a lawsuit, I believe, against the Federal Communications Commission, the government regulatory body in the United States, for failing to update the safety codes in the United States. There have been little ones like the city council in Berkeley, which is just outside of San Francisco, made a rule, a bylaw. So the towns have a bylaw. This is something that you can only do in this town, that said that you had to advertise the potential danger, the specific absorption rate factor for the cell phones in a conspicuous way wherever a cell phone is sold. Little things like that have happened. And you're probably going to see it first out of California. It tends to be more progressive. So if you're looking for stuff to happen, that would be my guess as to where it's going to happen.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Rodney.
Rodney, it has been amazing to talk to you, and I think we would stay here forever listening to you, because you know so much about it, and you've acted so much on this issue as well. So unfortunately, we have to end our live, and this is the longest live we have ever done, I believe. Thank you very much for everything. Thank you for joining us on this mission that we have here in Brazil to spread the information about the dangers of wireless technology and the level and the emissions of non-ionizing radiation. And I'm so grateful for your time.
Well, thank you for caring, and thank you all of you for doing what you're doing in Brazil. It's really it's amazing to know that this little thing that started in my daughter's kindergarten class has spread so far.
Sylvia, would you like to say anything?
It was great. It was a pleasure to hear you. You know so much, and you know how to get people to to learn about it, just like you did in your school. The people now, they don't need you anymore. They already explain to each other and to the parents that are coming in why the Wi-Fi is harmful. So that's great. That's what we need to do here in Brazil too. Congratulations.
Well, and people like yourself who have a PhD in physics are really critical because, there was a kid who I knew, my son's age, and he was the first kid with the BlackBerry in grade 6. He was always on his phone, and he was really businessy, and he was starting companies when he was 18 years old, like typical dynamo from Pretty River Academy. Achieves his dream, gets to go to engineering school at the top school in Canada, and he develops epilepsy. They take away his driver's license. He's having seizures. I mentioned to one of his parents that it is in the BlackBerry. Seizures is one of the possibility things in the BlackBerry manual that it's been shown to cause. And he says, I'm sorry, son, but I have a PhD in physics. You're wrong. So people who have a PhD in physics, who understand this stuff, are very valuable. Thank you all so much for doing this today. I truly appreciate it.
Thank you very much. So nós vamos agora terminar a nossa live com o Rodney, jornalista premiado do Canadá, que foi ótimo, mostrou muitas dicas para as escolas terem uma tecnologia segura, uso seguro dentro das escolas. E até a próxima. Muito obrigada ao Slow Phone, ao Fabiano. Obrigada, Silvia, da Celular e Saúde. Muito obrigada, Rodney. E good luck to Pretty River Academy.
Thank you very much. And thank you to you and to Daryl again.
You're welcome. Thank you.